I think when it comes down to it, what a lot of us are looking for unconsciously when we decide it's time to like get our lives in order and get organized and sort out our calendars and all the rest of it is basically freedom from time. We want to sort of get out from under our lives, get out from the situation that we're in, and feel like we're the sort of air traffic controllers of our lives, might be one metaphor, right? We're looking down on it, we're directing it, we've got all these goals being taken care of, all these obligations being fulfilled. But you can't get out from your life. You are in your life. We're born just sort of thrown into this river of time. You don't choose what moment in history you're born into. You don't choose the circumstances. You don't choose your parents. You're just there, and you're being born along the river of time, and one day you'll die. And this is incredibly alarming, but it's also just completely non-negotiable. It's just, that's where we are. You have to start from that. So if your approach to trying to find peace of mind involves denying that reality or getting out from it, that's just doomed to fail. What I think we can hope for, if not freedom from time, and what I think a lot of people in the pre-industrial era might have experienced naturally, is a deep sense of freedom in time, meaning that you acknowledge what the real situation is. You acknowledge where you are. You acknowledge how limited are the things you'll be able to do in the time you have, but you don't experience that as some kind of torment. You experience it as your birthright as a human, and you experience it as an exciting project to try to really make the most of the portion of time and the very limited control over that time that we have been given. There's certainly nothing wrong with trying to keep track of where you are and trying to be ambitious about where you want to get. But a lot of the time, as the Buddhist teacher Joseph Goldstein has said, we forget that a plan is just a thought. A plan is something that you come up with in the present moment as a statement of intent about where you want to be. It isn't some sort of magic tool for forcing your preferences about how things should go onto reality. What always happens with planning, you've set up a whole scheme for how you want things to go, but you have completely failed to factor in the fact that, you can't control outside events. You can't know when things are going to interrupt your plan. Also, we're absolutely terrible at planning how long things are going to take. So if you decide you're going to get something done over the course of the next month, it's very likely, due to this phenomenon called the planning fallacy, that in fact you're ignoring most of the variables that would lead you to conclude that actually you need 2 months or 3 months for it. It's even the case, the computer scientist Douglas Hofstadter called this Hofstadter's law, that everything always takes longer than you expect, even when you factor in the fact that everything always takes longer than you expect. So planning in this sense is a sort of a recipe for frustration when you sort of cling too tightly to your plans, because reality is going to violate your intentions for it every time. On the other hand, sometimes plans do work perfectly, and you find yourself just spending your life plodding through this plan that you made in a way that really can kill spontaneity and serve to eliminate opportunities for serendipity, for creative thoughts that could have helped you. If you're really so successfully focused on meeting one target, it can blind you to lots of other important things that could actually nourish the work you're doing or nourish the life that you're living. I think it's actually much more powerful if you want to do creative work, if you want to be able to respond to reality as it arises, to hold plans very loosely, to use them as navigational aids, right? Absolutely to have a list of things you'd like to try to achieve over the next few months or whatever it might be, but not to try to very rigorously attach them to temporal milestones, not to sort of force your actions into, well, I've got to get to this point by Friday, otherwise I've failed. Now, sometimes those will be imposed upon you in an organizational setting, of course. You'll have deadlines that you have to meet. But what we tend to then want to do is make the stress of that double or triple by introducing all our own planning methodologies on top of that, when in fact, if you can be more intuitive in how you respond to the day, if you can have that sense of a navigational aid, you know the 3 or 4 things you're trying to get done, but you're not trying to dictate when you do them very specifically. That actually allows you to harness the power of your moods, right? If you feel really excited to work on one element of a project and not right now on the other 3, it's a real shame if you've designed a system of planning that says, well, no, you've got to work on the other 3 today. You've got to deny the energy of that mood. You've got to try to eradicate it and gin up enthusiasm for these other parts. What you want to be able to do is to sort of surf those moods and use the energy that comes from wanting to do one thing rather than another. There will be parts of any project that you don't ever really want to work on at all. And so this isn't some sort of foolproof method for every single aspect of work to be huge fun. But don't make it worse for yourself by using these very, very strict plans where you sort of rigorously block out every hour of the week about what you have to do, regardless of how you feel in those moments about what would actually enthuse you, what you have energy to do. It makes a lot of intuitive sense, doesn't it? That if you've got a lot to do and it feels like more than you can do in the day or in the month, and that could be boring tasks and duties that are put onto you, or it could be wonderfully exciting ambitions for things you want to launch in your life. Either way, it just seems to make sense that what you would try to do then is to fit more of it in, to get more done in the same amount of time. And that is essentially the meaning of the word efficiency. And if you just sort of reach for a random time management productivity book, that's what you'll be guided to do. You'll be shown ways to fit more and more things into a day, an hour. Again, with the sort of implication that if you got really good at that, you might eventually be fitting everything or enough into your days to no longer feel like you're overwhelmed and like you're on the back foot and like you're always racing just to keep your head above water. The really big fundamental problem with this, and the thing that leads you into what I call the efficiency trap when you do it, is that we live in what you might think of as a world of infinite inputs. In other words, there is effectively no limit to the number of tasks that could fill up your to-do list. There's no limit to the number of emails you could receive. There's no limit to the number of things your boss could ask you to do. There's equally no limit to the number of businesses you might want to start or hobbies you might want to develop, places you might want to visit. There's just no limit to all these potential supplies of experience that we could have as human beings. There's a problem in town planning called induced demand, right? So they have a motorway that is very congested, or a stretch of road that's very congested. So they add another lane to ease the congestion. They make the system more efficient at processing cars. But then that makes that stretch of highway more attractive to drivers who'd previously been staying away because of the congestion. So what happens is more cars come and use it, and then the congestion reverts to what it was just before. You've increased the capacity to process stuff, and all that's happened is you've just got bogged down in too much stuff at a new level of too much stuff. There's even some fascinating historical research to suggest that when supposedly labor-saving devices were first introduced into American and European homes, vacuum cleaners, washing machines, they didn't save any labor at all, because as the capacity to keep things clean increased, the societal expectations for how clean your house would be increased. So once you can keep your family's clothes completely spotless because you've got an electric washing machine, well, then suddenly you feel that you have to. So you end up doing more laundry than you did before. And you see this problem happening again and again and again. If you feel that you've got too much to do, and the tactic that you use to try to deal with that is to get through more and more of it in the same amount of time, all else being equal, you're going to end up with even more to do and feeling even busier and more rushed and more stressed. And you see this pattern. It's a really interesting thing, I think, actually, how you see this pattern arising in all sorts of walks of life, right? If a system is made more efficient, if a system becomes able to process more and more stuff, and the system could be your personal productivity, then all else being equal, there'll just be more stuff to process. So one particular version of the efficiency trap is the idea that I came to think of as the importance trap. And this is where we begin to get really practical in terms of what you can prioritize in the course of the day to make sure you don't fall into this problem of inviting more and more busy work into your life. Back when I worked on the staff of a daily newspaper, I would consistently find that the better I got at getting things done, the more I had to admit that what was happening was that I was getting better at doing the least important things and postponing the most important things, because I would tell myself that these really important things needed lots of time, lots of focus, and they needed all these other little things that were nagging at my attention to be dealt with first. So I would have an ambition of writing some particularly important article that could really make a difference to my career, really make a difference to people who read it. And I would think, well, okay, but I really need to be able to focus on that. So first of all, I've got to clear up all these other little things I said I'd do and answer all these little emails and queries. This situation of clearing the decks, right? You're always clearing the decks to make time for focus and meaningful activity later on. Many people run their days like this, right? They get into their desk, their home office, the office where they work, and they tell themselves that first they're going to deal with all the urgent stuff, get it all out of the way, and they're hoping that maybe come around 2 p.m. or something, there's going to be these expanses of time to get down to what matters. And it very, very rarely happens. And the reason why it rarely happens is because there's an infinite supply of things to fill the decks with. And there's just no reason to believe that if you give another hour to getting through that seemingly infinite supply, that you're going to feel any closer to the end of it. In fact, you're going to generate more items for it because you're going to reach out to people and deal with things and move on from problem A to problem B in a whole sequence of annoying problems. And so you're never going to get to that time where you're focusing on the things that you really care about the most. So I think it's an incredibly important shift in how you deal with your daily time to give up clearing the decks, to really deeply acknowledge that you are never going to get to a situation where all the little tasks are out of the way, and to realize that instead what you need to do is to focus on the things that you care about while knowing and feeling a bit anxious about the fact that the decks are not clear. Of course, you can't just neglect all these tasks. Very few of us are in a position to just walk away from our inboxes for weeks at a time. But you can do a couple of things. Firstly, you can switch the order in which you do these things if you have that autonomy, right? You can give up spending a couple of hours on email at the start of the day in order to free up time later on. And you can go into your day focused on the things that matter the most and then put an hour or two into email later, not expecting to get to the end of anything, just giving that some time because it needs some time. And then the other thing you can do is really just it's really just an internal thing, right? Where you come to understand that if you are ever going to give time to the things that you care about the most, then it's just going to have to be done in the context of there being lots of other things sort of yapping for your attention in the distance. You don't want to make doing the things that matter to you the most conditional on getting rid of all the things that don't matter to you as much, because then you're going to spend your whole time dealing with the unimportant things, systematically postponing to the future precisely the things that you cared about the most. The true art of time management is not finding new ways to cram more and more things into your day, but learning how to wisely decide what to neglect. It's actually the art of creative neglect, of understanding that most things are going to get neglected and then making those decisions wisely and consciously and in a way that doesn't lead you to feel tormented by guilt about all the things that you're not doing. Because at the very bottom of this, there is this truth that we don't like to stare in the face, that, the set of things that feel like they matter to you, there's just no reason to assume that that's something that can fit fully inside the time that you have in your life. Just because an activity, a relationship, an ambition, an obligation, just because it feels important, that is not some sort of magical guarantee that there's going to be a way to find time for it. So you hear an awful lot in time management advice about the importance of saying no, for example, right? Got to say no, got to learn to say no, got to be willing to say no to things. But secretly, I think a lot of us still imagine that what that means is just saying no to the things that are kind of tedious and pointless and we didn't want to do in the first place. It means being willing to say no to things that actually do matter or feel like they matter, right? It means being able to accept that if you really want to pour your heart into a handful of friendships, you might not be able to attend to a whole lot of other friendships. If you really want to get good at one or two hobbies outside of your work, you might have to, at least for now, give up trying to improve on a whole lot of other ones. It's that willingness to sort of step in to the state of being a finite human where there are more things that matter than you'll ever have time to do. That is, I think, the true art of time management. And it's ironic at the end of the day, I think, that it's really an emotional skill, right? It's not ultimately about the latest app or the latest system for designing the list of things you're going to do. It's about developing the willingness to sort of tolerate the discomfort and the anxiety of knowing that, yeah, there are probably 100 other things on some level that you ought to be doing today, but you just can't do them all. You're not going to. And were you to try, you would do all of them worse and less fulfillingly and in ways that helped other people to a lesser degree. So that's why I think that at the end of the day, the true art of time management is knowing what to neglect